Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live session um, organized by GDG Richmond. So, in today's live session, we're going to talk about addressables. All right. So, um, in augmented reality, when we have a lot of assets, we have one problem in common, which is how we can host our data so that we don't have to change our application every time we update anything in our AR app, right? That is, if you add something in your augmented reality app, you should have an option to change that from cloud, and that is where addressables comes into play. Now, what we can do with addressable is that we can dynamically host different kind of assets into our project. That is going to help us to manage multiple data or multiple asset in a efficient manner, right? So yeah, so I'm just going to wait for another 5 minutes and then we're going to start. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a brief introduction of this project that is currently opened. So if you go to the playlist in this channel, you'll find something called creating an IKEA app clone with Unity and Air Foundation. The same video stream will be later on like posted as a smaller portion video. The same content will be recorded again as a smaller content, not a live session like this, so that if you miss something in this live session, or if you want to get a quicker overview of this same problem, you can check out that video, right? So yeah, this project is a part of that tutorial series where I basically go through from the start to the end of how a augmented reality app like IKEA Place can be made using Unity 3D, Google Cloud, and Air Foundation. And obviously we're making for Android, so we're going to have the AR Core SDK integrated with Air Foundation, right? So I am not going to use this project for this session because this might overwhelm a lot of audience, but again this similar content will be again posted into that series. If you are interested into this project, this particular project, you can check into that series. That is going to help you creating the project from start to end. So for this project I'm just going to create a new Unity project just to make it easier for us to understand addressables. When you have a clear understanding of how we manage addressables, then it is not going to be hard for you to understand the later tutorial where we basically discuss the same project inside our actual IKEA clone project. Okay, so yeah, so without further ado, let's get started. I am just going to create a new 3D project. I'm going to call it AR. Maybe I don't know what can be the name. The name can be, we are trying to do something with um, addressables, right? So AR addressables, and just hit create. So previously Unity has had something called asset bundles, but asset bundles was not much stable in terms of, like, when you have different kind of complex structure of the assets, then it was really hard to manage. And then after that, Unity recently introduced addressables. It was in beta for a while, but now they have integrated that package as a finished product inside Unity, right? So we're going to use addressables for that reason. But if you browse a little bit, you can also use um, the other solutions, right? Like asset bundles. But for this tutorial, I think asset addressables is a better choice than asset bundle. Okay, so yeah, so to get ourselves started, the first thing that we need to do is actually installing a few packages. So we need to go to window and then go to package manager. From here we need to create, sorry, install the addressables. Just search for addressables and install. Now one note here that I am using the latest Unity version, almost the latest. I'm not using the latest, I'm using the 2019.1. If you use any like previous version that does not have the, like, the upgraded addressables, it might be inside the preview package. So that means when you are trying to install it, you might have to go to advanced and check this show preview packages if you don't find the um, addressables package directly in here, right? So yeah, I'm just going to hit install and then wait for a while to install it. All right, still installing. Okay, so we have the addressables now. The next thing we need to do is basically create a Google Cloud account. So what I'm going to do here, actually we are not going to create Google account just now. Let's see how we can load some asset and how we can play around with this asset addressables, right? And then I'm going to show you how we can host that asset inside Google Cloud. Okay, so for now let's see that how we can create some addressable assets. So just for example purpose, I'm going to create a cube and I'm going to just create a prefab out of it. So that's why I'm going to create a folder here. This is going to be prefabs, and I'm going to drag and drop the cube prefab in here. Now creating a asset to addressables is really simple. You just need to hit on this addressables option in the prefab, right? Remember, if you click on the asset itself, the prefab, you'll find a option called addressables and you need to check on that, right? And we can see the changes inside this addressable panel. If you go to the addressable panel. You can find it from window, asset management, addressables, and then group. We can see there is a default group which is basically created automatically when we create this new addressable package, right? So when you install the addressable package, this is automatically created. And we have this cube prefab that we just created in here, and basically we can make it a like more readable name by right clicking on it and simplify the addressable names. That will just give us the name of that prefab, right? And also we can assign some labels. You'll see in later on why we need labels. So for now just create a new level. I'm just going to click on the manage level and then hit on this plus icon here, give it a name. I'm going to call it models and save. Finally, I'm going to check that here. All right, now what? The next thing we need to do is basically find a way to show the addressable asset, which is this queue, into our project. But before doing that, let's play around with a little bit more. Let's create another one. So I'm going to create another 3D object. I'm going to call it sphere, and I'm going to drag and drop it inside the prefab. This is another addressable, so I can either click on this addressable, which is going to do something like this. I'm just going to go back to asset management addressable groups. Now you can see we have only one group, which is the default, right? But we can, when we have our, like when our project is more complicated, we might have different categories of addressable assets, right? So we can have models, we can have prefabs, we can have textures, we can have materials, and different kind of stuff. That is that's a good idea to, like, categorize them into different groups. So that is why we are going to create a new group here. We're going to create a new group, call it as, this is going to be a packed asset, so I'm going to call it as models, right? And in here we can simply, the easiest way to like add this stuff into our group, into our addressable group, is to drag and drop it directly inside the folder, right? So I can drag and drop the model into the models folder, sorry, models group. Does not look good here. Okay, much better. Okay, so all right, now I can again change this to model, and I want to be a simplified name. So just right click on that and click on simplify addressable name. Okay, so what's next? So the next thing that we're going to do is basically loading this asset directly using addressables. There's two things. One is basically loading the asset. That means you load this asset from somewhere, from our addressable reference, and then you add it into your project asset, right? So currently both of these are inside our project, but when you build the game, the concept is that if these are addressables, these things are not going to be included into your game package. This is going to help you to make your package really, really small, because you see that when you make a application, a mobile application for Android or iOS, this is really critical that the download size of that particular asset is not that big, right? So this is what happens when we just make them addressable. These things are not going to be included into our project. So we have to somehow load that assets into our project before the game start, or after you install the game, after the user install the game. At the first time when he opens his game, we are going to help him to download this asset from some remote server. But for now, we are assuming that everything is somewhere in our local server, although it's not. And we're going to see how we can basically load them through addressables. If you have some idea about the resources folder, this is going to look similar, but the only difference is that we can make async call with addressables, and we can also host this inside our inside some remote, which we could not do um, if we used the resources folder, right? Okay, so yeah, so let's create a new folder. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it scripts. I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm going to call it load, or maybe asset loader. Let's open it up. Okay, so what we're going to do here is basically we're going to asynchronously load the assets into our game. All right, and then when the assets are loaded, we're going to add them into some list so that we have a reference of that particular asset that we have just downloaded. Okay, so to do that we need the addressables class, and I am using JetBrains. So JetBrains automatically adds this namespace whenever I basically write any classes here. But if you are using Visual Studio, make sure you add this namespace in the top of your script. Otherwise, you will find an error in here. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to add I'm going to load, right? I'm going to load assets. So for now, we are just going to do this. We're going to do load asset async, and here we're going to do game object, and I can pass a key. So the key here is going to be the labels that I talked about previously. So when we created this sorry, okay, so when we created the addressable here, we had a level, right? So you see here, if I go to the asset manager addressable groups, we had a group name which is models, and we also had labels. The label for the cube is model, the label for the sphere is also models. So this is the stuff that we need. We need the level, we need models, right? And now remember, I'm loading one asset. I'm just checking load asset async, right? I'm not using any plural here. So that means only one asset is going to be loaded. Okay, so here I can do a callback. So for that, I'm going to need a method. I'm going to create void on load done, right? And here I need on load. Oh, actually, let's see. Right, on load done. You should do this. Now, obviously, there is an error because it expect uh, something else from us. So let's see what I am doing wrong. First of all, this parameter here is not correct. And second of all, we need to add an action here, right? So the when the action completed is invoked, then we're going to add this callback on load done. There is an error because the onload done expects some kind of special parameter which is async operation handle game object, right? So this is going to be loading only one object, remember that. Okay, now I can do this. I can just when this is done, I can say that I'm just going to create a list. This is going to be the list of game objects. So maybe, I don't know, loaded asset equal new list, and we're going to just simply going to add the object dot result here. So this is going to give us the game object that we find here. Okay, so let's test it out and see what happens. I'm going to make it a serialized field so we can see the list into our Unity editor. All right, let's drag and drop, just create a new empty game object, drag and drop the asset loader. I'm going to call it loader, and in here if I just hit the play button, you can see that the cube is loaded. Only the cube is loaded, right? Because the cube was the first asset in the list, but we want all the asset those belongs to the models level. How can we do that? Well, it's really simple. I'm just going to comment that out, and then addressables dot load assets async. So the same thing, but it's plural. Okay, and then we need the location, which is going to be just a label, so models, and we need a callback in the same parameter, which we can do on load done. And again, this is not going to be, it's not going to be happy with what we have done. We need to pass the game object. This is a generic type, so we need to like define that what kind of things that we are expecting when we are calling this on asset async, right? So we are expecting game object, so that's why we need to pass game object here. And again, the definition of this onload done is not correct, so just need to do this. Again, I am using JetBrains, so I am getting those kind of, you know, suggestion. I don't know if you will get the same kind of suggestion in Visual Studio. If you don't get that kind of suggestion, you can simply just type this method, and just it should be working. Okay, it should work perfectly. Okay, so what does this do? So it checks for a game object, tries to load the game object which has a label called models, and when this is done, it basically calls this on load done. Each time it finds a prefab or a addressable asset called model. Like, how can I explain it? I can go here, asset addressable groups, right? So currently we have two addressable asset which has a label of models, right? So what happens here is that whenever it okay, whenever it finds a addressable with a label model, it loads that addressable, and when the loading is done, it calls this method. So each time the loading is done, that means one asset has been loaded. So we can basically add that asset directly into all list. Now check here that the parameter is looking for is basically game object, so we don't have to do obj.result, we can simply pass the object, right? Now this is the fun part. We can now load this, we can play this. Now as you can see, we have two assets in here, right? That's awesome. So what next can we do? Well, let's see. Now we are loading everything inside our project and we don't have any remote server. So what we're going to do next is basically make it so that everything is being loaded from our cloud, right? So now we're going to need the Google Cloud. So to do that, let's go to cloud and we will search for Google Cloud. Now when you come into Google Cloud, you need to like create an account. I'm not going to show you that, you can do it by yourself. This is really simple. If you are struggling, just pause the video, or I'm going to wait for a while. You can just go online and check how you can create a Google account and add that to your Google Cloud account. This is really simple, really straightforward. You will basically be asked to do some payment methods and stuff, although it's free, you don't have to pay initially for it, and for learning purpose it's more than enough. When you are building the app for actual users, when there should be a lot of API call, then it costs you some money. But for starting our project, we're not going to like cost any money, so it's really simple. I'm not going to show you those stuff. You can directly go to the console and here all the fun happens. So we are going to basically create a new app in this cloud platform, so we can host our asset, right? So to do that, we need to go click on this, or for you it can be different. There can be another option to create a new like app, right? I already have a lot of projects here, so I'm going to click on here and it asks me to select a project. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to create a new project so everyone is in the same page. I'm going to call it GDG, GDG Richmond Yard, and then I'm going to create, and that's it. That's how simple this is, right? So this is how you create a new project. I'm going to select that project, and from here we need to basically go to our storage settings, right? So I need to go to storage and then click on the browse, and in here we need to create a new bucket, and I'm going to call this bucket as Unity assets. GDG maybe, and then continue here. I'm not going to change anything, just use the default settings and then create. It might take a while, and then when that is done, we're going to go back to the bucket details, and in here we need to give some permission. So by default, Google Cloud does not gives you permission to load assets directly from the cloud storage, right? So you need to give some permission so that it's public. So we can go to permission and click on add members, and in here we're going to do all users, and from here I'm going to do cloud storage and then viewer. Okay, save. All right, so now we have the bucket all set up. The last thing that we need is basically uploading the actual folder or actual addressable asset which we are going to load from here. To do that, we need to go back to Unity, go to Window, again Asset Management, Addressables. First of all, let's go to Group, and also we need to go to the settings. So just go here again and go to settings. Now in here you'll see an option called build remote catalog, right? So you need to check that. Let's put it here so we can, yeah. So when you hit on the build remote catalog, you'll see there is an option called build path and load path. So you can hit on there, and then for build path you're going to do remote build path, and for load path you're going to do remote load path. All right, now after we are done with this, what will happen is that it automatically assumes that this is our load path and this is our build path. Now where does he like found this data? Where does it found the server data slash standalone OSX, right? So how does it know this link? Well, to do that we need to go to the profile. So the profile contains all the information of the server data, or where you are going to host your asset and stuff like that. For our case, we are going to host our asset into remote directory, which is not a localhost because we don't have any localhost, right? We are going to use the we're going to use the Google Cloud Platform storage bucket to do that. Now you can get the link by clicking the overview, and then you can click on this link. Just copy that, go back to Unity and do this, and that's it. All right, so now you can see after I did this, this load path is automatically changed to a correct correct Google Cloud link, right? So that gives us the actual public link where we need to basically sync our assets. After we are done with that, we also need to make sure that the models here are also set to remote build path and remote load path. Finally, we're going to click on this build, go to new build, and we're going to do default build script. Save and continue. This is going to take a little bit time, a few seconds, and that's it. We are done. Now we can go to asset, reveal in Finder. For Windows, you can do show in Explorer. So that will take you to the assets folder, and in here you can see a new folder created called server data, and based on which platform you are currently in, for me my project is in PC, Linux and standalone version. So because I am using Mac, the target platform is Mac OS. If you are using Windows, it might be Windows OS, or Windows, sorry, it can be Windows. If you are using iOS, it should be iOS. If you are using Android, it should be Android. So that is how the name of this folder is generated, right? So because I'm using Mac and the build setting says that the application is going to be for MacBook, that is why the folder is called standalone OSX, right? Okay, now this is the folder that we need to host. This is the folder which contains all the content of our addressables. So if we go here and upload this folder directly in here, we are basically done. We can now just add this open scene, and for just for testing purpose, I'm going to click on use existing build here, and then try to play the game. And if I click on the loader, you can see I have a problem. The problem is that this two game object, they are all empty, right? And I also have this kind of error. Now this happens a lot in addressables. This is kind of, I don't know, maybe this is a bug or something else. So to solve this problem, what I have found is that if we clean this build, right, and if we just do another build here, this should work. If it doesn't work, we have to do something else. Still doesn't work. So let's do something else. Let's do this. We are going to do new build. We need to first of all clean this build. We are going to then click on this model and make it a local build, local load, and then we're going to run this. Oh, sorry, we need to create a new build as well. Yeah, so if we do this a couple of times, this then starts working. Probably this is a bug. I think I'll report this in Unity page and see if I get any response. Yeah, so after I do that, if I go back to build path, load path, right, and do the same thing again, clean everything, build again. If I go to simulated build, I think that should work probably. Yeah, you see that's now working right in here. So yeah, so play around with this. Just do it one more time and see if it actually works in the build mode. uh, it doesn't work. uh, yeah, so there is some sort of issue with Google Cloud and this addressable system, but more or less it works after you just clean the build a few times and then you know try it again. It sometimes works, as I tested earlier. But even if it doesn't work, nothing to worry about. We are going to do this simulated groups, and after you do that, if we play it, you'll see everything is working, right? So yeah, should be working. Yeah, so you see this is working, right? So now if you have this, if we have this assets loaded inside this asset loader script, then we can use those game object into our project as a simple game object, right? So that is all we need. We can now use that game object to instantiate objects. So I'm just going to give you one example. I'm going to create another script, and I'm going to show you just a random script which is going to spawn object, right? And in the spawn object, if we go in here, and I'm going to create a reference for the asset loader. So asset loader loader, and in here I'm going to check if input dot get key down s, then we are going to load or we're going to check the list. So I'm going to create a property here that is going to help us to get the assets. So I'm going to go to refactor, encapsulate field, and not auto, just read. Next. Yeah, so that is going to give me the read access of loaded assets. So I'm going to use that loaded assets, right? Yep. And I'm going to use a random range 0, 2 because I know the length is 2. Just this is just for example purpose. Obviously in actual project we're not going to do something like this. And again, if you're really interested about this project, check out the playlist. I'm going to re-upload this video again in a short form to continue the whole video tutorial process. And there is already 10 or 11 video already there that is going to give you a more or like overall view of how you can use the Google AR core and AR foundation to create augmented reality applications. So check out that video if you're really interested, and that series is going to continue this tutorial one more time. So if you still have some confusion in this live session, you can obviously take help of that one to you know um, like solve your problems or get rid of your confusions. Yeah, and in that project we always follow actual design patterns. We don't do this kind of stuff, right? So that is going to be a good practice as well. Okay, all right, so this is going to be a random asset and I'm going to instantiate that. So I can do instantiate this, and that's it. So if I now create another game object in here, drag and drop the spawner, drag and drop the loader, there's some error. Okay, all right, so yeah, now if I play the game, save and continue, now you see the loader has these two loaded objects. So if I press S, I have the cube. If I keep pressing S, it creates different random objects. Obviously the position is all in the same because we have not mentioned the location, but you got some idea that how we can use this platform to create our own addressable assets and use them into our project, right? So yeah, I'm going to end the session here, and if you have any questions we can talk about that. We're going to be here for another 15 minutes and then we're going to close this session. And like I said, a more concise copy of this same content will be available uh, in this channel under the AR Foundation IKEA course. So yeah, stay tuned on that.